PAHO's Perinatal Information System, or SIP, is an electronic health information system that allows healthcare providers to deliver better care for mothers and their unborn babies through the creation of perinatal clinical records. The mother's information is entered into the clinical record throughout her pregnancy, starting with her very first visit to the antenatal clinic until the birth, when she and her baby are discharged from the healthcare facility. The perinatal clinical record is secure and is easily available in hard copy or via electronic devices. SIP also allows healthcare workers to collect data on important health and social indicators. The system also generates reports that are easily analyzed to identify gaps and trends. Additionally, SIP can be linked to any other electronic database existing in a health facility or institution with the country. SIP is available for free to all PAHO member countries. 22 countries are already using SIP to help fulfill their commitments to the health of mothers and newborns. The better and more accessible the information, the better healthcare will be. SIP is a solution to generate and access comprehensive perinatal clinical records.
So after this brief presentation of the perinatal information system, you're going to see a demo showing how to upload a record in the new SIP Plus. The base that we're going to use today is a demo. You can try it once I'm done with the presentation. I'm going to leave you the address to download this demo. Please note that the user's name is at your hospitals. You're going to have your own access credentials. So, to create a new form, we must go to New Form. We select the patient's country. Let's assume that she is from Guyana. The type of ID the patient comes with, let's assume that it's her passport, and then the ID number she was given at our facilities. In this case, the patient is coming for the first time. She's pregnant. She comes to her first antenatal visit, and this is her first pregnancy. The form we'll open for this patient is the perinatal clinical record, or SIP base. That's the short name of the form. You see it on the upper left corner. SIP base is the short name of this form. Having defined this, we'll go to the form. The first thing that we'll do is to enter the patient's patronymic data, and here we start. In this section, we're going to enter the patient's medical, family, and personal history, as well as her obstetric history. This patient has never been pregnant. This is her first pregnancy, so we put a 0 and all the rest gets auto completed. So let's say that this pregnancy was planned. The patient was not using any contraception methods. She hasn't had any previous pregnancies. So obviously she had no history of twin pregnancies. Let us see the next section. Whenever you see these discs in green, it means that the data are being recorded automatically. If the stacks of discs are yellow, it means that the data are stored only on the computer locally because you're working offline. Once you go online, you'll see that these green discs start moving. If the stack is green and moving, that means that the data that have been saved locally in the computer are being uploaded to the server. We must wait until those disks cease jumping to be sure that all the data stored locally have been correctly uploaded to the server. And now we go on loading the data on the current pregnancy. Remember that this form is completed prospectively, starting when the patient comes for her first pregnancy visit. This is the section describing her current pregnancy. So we're going to enter any data available at this first visit. None of the information down here is available yet because this corresponds to the lab testing that we're going to order at this initial visit, and we're probably going to have the results the next time she comes. So this is as far as we get with the data that we can enter at this first visit. We do not have to click on any keys or save the data in any other way. The data are already saved. The patient leaves the office, and we then go on entering data on a new form. If the next patient that comes to the office is also coming for the first time, or if she had already been registered, we have to retrieve her record using her ID number. Let's assume that the patient that has just left comes back for her second pregnancy with a visit a month later. The way you retrieve her logs to continue to enter her data is by entering her ID number here. So, and here she is. The patient is Jane Doe. And we are going to edit her SIP base. These data had already been entered, and we'll go to the second section, and you'll see that the information that appears there is what we had entered at the previous visit. So let's assume that all this information is already available. So here I'm going to enter the new information. The data recorded in this section includes the dates and basic information collected at the antenatal visits. I'm only going to load one as an example. Notice that here there's a dot. If you want to say that the patient weighed 46 kilos, it's important to add a 0 at the end, so it will be interpreted as a decimal. Let's now go to the next section. In this section, we are going to enter the data about childbirth. Here it's important to state that what you're about to record has to do with a childbirth and not an abortion. If it were an abortion, then you would have to state that it is an abortion. And this is important because when you want to draw statistics about births at your facilities, this is a variable that the system uses to filter the data. That is, you must indicate that whatever you're going to enter from now on applies to childbirth. In this section, you're going to record the data about the newborn's birth. If the child in question was not a twin, you check that it was not a twin. This variable appears as a 0 by default. If it had been a twin, you must check yes, and this is going to change automatically to 1 so that you may record all of the data about the first newborn. Once you have completed all the data about the first newborn, you must come here to the top. You have to click on this plus sign in red, and you're going to see that this variable changes to a 2. All these variables are going to remain blank. That will enable you to enter the information about the second newborn. In this case, as it was a singleton, that is a non-twin baby, we'll leave it as it is. As you see there at the bottom of the page, SIP issued an alert stating that the date of birth entered cannot be later than the date of admission. And if we look at the date of birth that we had entered, it was September the 3rd, 2020, and the date of admission is September the 9th, 2020. So clearly there's a date inconsistency. We look at the form again, And we notice that actually the patient's date of admission had been September the 3rd. We correct that, and the alert that SIP had issued disappears, and we can go on to the next section. In this section, we continue to collect data about the newborn. In this section, we're going to record the mother's conditions, if any, during pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum that were not fatal. We have summary variables related to hypertension disorders, to the presence of infections, bleeding during the first trimester, second trimester, and third trimester, and postpartum. If the woman didn't present any of these 3 morbidities, we check no. If she did have one of the 3 or more of the 3, for instance, she may have had gestational hypertension, then we check yes. And here, remember to change the summary variable like this. It's important to avoid any inconsistencies between the summary variable and the variables that make up the summary variables. Because if one of these is positive, then in the summary variable this should appear as yes, because this one in the end is what we typically use to analyze, right? Let's now see the next section. So section 7, metabolic disorders, other disorders, and obstetric complications. This section of interventions refers to the first line of action interventions implemented to treat the complications of the conditions we just mentioned. The woman's conditions during pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum. Let's assume that this patient didn't require any of these interventions. After this, we have the near-miss section. These morbidities that we have just mentioned may get complicated, giving rise to a near-miss case or even death. They may manifest clinically with any of these clinical criteria of organ system dysfunction, with some test results and requiring life-saving interventions. These are interventions that are used as a last resort. The case is defined as a near-miss if the patient suffered a serious condition that did not result in death. If this woman finally dies, it's a case of maternal death and no longer a near-miss. So, this patient, fortunately, did not meet any of these criteria. So in the summary variable, we're going to check no. This is of utmost importance. It's important to point this out in the summary variable because, as I said, these are the first variables that we analyze to check the situation, to monitor what's going on. And we move on to the last section, the mother's discharge. The information that we're going to record here is the mother's status upon discharge. How was she doing when she was discharged? So with this information, we conclude our logs of the clinical history from pregnancy to childbirth that constitute the perinatal clinical record.